Today's objective is I can find the measurement of a missing angle by writing an equation and applying a strategy. So we have not learned this standard yet in 4th grade. However, we have learned all about types of angles, how to measure angles with protractors, and how to estimate angle measurements. So we are going to use everything that we've already learned about angles to help us solve all different types of missing angle questions and additive angle questions. Let's start off by looking at some vocab. First up, we have angle. An angle is the area between where two lines meet. So if you see the 3 examples on this vocab card, when we're measuring angles, we're measuring the area between where 2 lines meet. So we label our angles with these little arcs, and when we see a perfect square corner like this one, we mark it with a little box to show that it's 90 degrees. We learned that we can find angles everywhere. We can find angles in rectangles, right, where we have all 90-degree angles. We find angles in triangles. For example, this is an obtuse angle, right? It's greater than 90 degrees. And over here, we have acute angles that are smaller than 90 degrees. Next up, let's take a look at degrees. Degrees are a measure for angles. So it's the way that we measure angles. For example, this angle measures 135 degrees. We said that a right angle is exactly 90 degrees. We know that anything greater than 90 degrees is obtuse, and anything less than 90 degrees is acute. Next up, we've got additive angles. This is a new vocab word. Additive angles are angles that add up to a given total. And if you look at the example inside this card, we see 2 different angles, right, inside one angle. So our full angle, our total angle, is 80 degrees. And if you see, it's split into 2 smaller angles, 50 degrees and 30 degrees. So when we add 50 degrees plus 30 degrees, we get 80 degrees. So that is just angles that add up to a given total. That's what we're going to be focusing on today. Next up, we've got complementary angles and supplementary angles. Complementary angles are angles that add up to 90 degrees. So if we look at this picture, I see my total angle here, right? And then I've got 2 smaller angles, 60 degrees and 30 degrees. When we add up 30 plus 60, we get 90 degrees. So our complementary angles are any angles that add up to 90 degrees. Next up, supplementary angles. These are angles that add up to 180 degrees. So 180 degrees, this is another benchmark angle, just like 90 degrees. This is an angle measurement that we already have memorized. We can look at a straight line and already know that the angle measures 180 degrees. So when we're looking at this example, I see my straight line. I automatically know that's 180 degrees. And we can prove that by adding the smaller angles inside. So I've got 30 degrees plus 150 degrees. Well, we know that 150 plus 30 is 180 degrees. So our supplementary angles are any angles that add up to 180 degrees. All right, I think we're ready for our first problem. All right, so first up, we've got our new anchor chart off to the side here, additive angles. We've got 4 steps. Draw and label our angles. Draw a part-part whole chart. Figure out if we are adding or subtracting. And then use a strategy to solve. So let's go ahead and answer this problem using our steps. If angle ADC measures 87 degrees and angle ADB measures 59 degrees, what is the measure of angle BDC? So we're going to use our anchor chart to help us solve. Step 1. Step 1 tells me to draw and label my angles. So my angles are already drawn. I see that they are labeled at each point with a letter. Now we're going to use what we are given from the question to help us label the angles. So first, we know that angle ADC measures 87 degrees. So I'm going to trace ADC. A, D, C. Tracing the lines helps me figure out which piece of the angle we're talking about. So now we know our whole angle, so from here all the way over, is going to measure 87 degrees. This is going to be our total angle. Next up, angle ADB measures 59 degrees. So now we're talking about angle ADB. So again, I trace the lines to help me figure out which angle this is talking about, ADB. So we start with A, trace down to D, and up to B. So that tells us that we're looking at this angle right here. Our problem tells us that angle ADB measures 59 degrees. So I'll label this 59 degrees. Now our final question asks us, what is the measure of angle BDC? So again, to figure out which is angle BDC, I trace it on my picture. So we trace starting at B, D, C. So now we're looking at this smaller angle here. And we're asked to solve for this angle. We don't know it yet, so I'm just going to put a question mark. So now we have our picture labeled with everything we know from our question. Moving on to step 2. Step 2 tells me to draw a part-part whole chart. And our part-part whole chart looks just like this. All right, so to draw a part-part whole chart, we need 2 important things. We need our whole. We could also call this the total. And then we also have our 2 parts. So that's why we call it a part-part whole chart. Our 2 parts, when we add them together, equal our whole. So it's really, really important that we're filling out this chart correctly to solve for our problem. So first thing I ask myself, Do I have a whole? Do I have a total? Yes, we are given the whole angle here is 87 degrees. So for my whole, I'm going to write 87 degrees. That's what my total angle measures. Now we look at the two parts. I see one part here, angle ADB, right, is 59 degrees. So that's one of my parts, 59 degrees. Now my other part, which we just saw, that's what we're solving for. That's an unknown. So I'm going to put a question mark here. We are solving for that missing part. All right, so we're finished with our part whole chart. Next up, look at step 3. Identify the operation. So to solve these problems, we're either going to add or subtract. So if we were given our two parts, then we would add to find our whole or our total. But in this case, we are already given our total or our whole. We have one part, and we also have a missing part. So to solve for a missing part, we are going to subtract. So we take our total or our whole, 87 degrees, and we're going to subtract our part in order to solve for our missing part. So we've got 7 minus 9. We've got more on the floor, so we need to go next door to borrow. When I borrow 1 from my 8, we're left with 7. I give 10 to 7 to make 17. 17 minus 9 is 8. And 7 minus 5 is 2. So we've got 28 degrees. We solved for our missing part. So we can go back to our picture and fill in our missing angle, 28 degrees. Now, a way that we can check our work, well, we can add up our two parts to double check that they equal our whole. So let's add 59 plus 28. And again, this is just to check our work. So 9 plus 8 is 17. 5 plus 2 is 7. Plus 1 is 8. 87 degrees. Yep, that matches our whole. All right, so we have solved our first additive angles question. We were given our total and a part. We subtracted our part from our whole to find our missing part. Remember, while we're solving these problems, to use everything you already know about angles to help you solve. Go ahead and watch the next video, and we're going to solve a problem together.